Okay, we're back, and here we are on tape number 5. This tape we're going to kind of regress just a little bit and go back to some of Billy's early years, and we're also going to go over his early contacts with Ascot. Billy's, of course, most well known for all of his contacts with the Plejadians, which began in 1975. And few people are aware, actually, that he had contacts almost throughout his entire life. And that by the time the Plejadian contacts had started, Billy had already had years of contacts with another race and with other people, and been on many adventures which had served to educate him up to this point, so the contacts with the Plejadians would really be possible. Kind of an interesting side note, I want to give you a little background into Billy's early life. On an earlier tape, we discussed his early contacts with Sfath, the old Plejadian man who had kind of helped him through his early years. He had caused him to be born at a certain time and saw to his early education, and also taken Billy up for his first ride in a spaceship. Well, Billy's young school years were plagued with problems. You can almost imagine a young person in school that is having visitations from highly evolved extraterrestrial beings. It's very difficult then to go back to the schoolyard or the classroom and deal with mundane things like reading and writing when your mind is filled with far-off things of the universe and complex philosophical and spiritual philosophies and ideas that are running through your head. So Billy had a lot of difficulty really dealing with being an average child. And because of this, he spent a lot of time just being absent from school, from wandering out in the forest, thinking on his own, being led out into nature to discover and to observe more about nature and its laws. Because many things were going through his head, because he was constantly receiving telepathic transmissions from Sfath during these years. Well, what happened was Billy became kind of the town juvenile delinquent. That's what they thought of him. He was always skipping school, and anytime something would go wrong or somebody would complain about something, like maybe something missing from their house or something, they'd usually blame it on young Billy right away. Billy, for some reason, had trouble defending himself. Whenever he would be questioned by the local authorities about, what his connection was, maybe with a certain crime or problem, Billy somehow would just keep quiet and not even answer. And he always felt it kind of unusual himself that he wasn't able to do this. But it got him in a lot of trouble. As a matter of fact, he landed in young men's institutions on a couple of different occasions because he just wouldn't speak up for himself, and he was assumed guilt in many cases. He even remarks that in some cases he would go ahead and sign the police reports, knowing full well that he had nothing to do with the crime that had been committed, but found himself still incarcerated in some sort of institution for the, I guess you would call it the young insane or the young troublemakers. He finally wound up in what's called the Renault Clinic, which is a clinic for people who are psychically disturbed, where psychiatrists and psychologists can observe people. He was kind of young for that, but apparently too many days and weeks alone on the street and so forth led him to too many problems, and he wound up in this Renault Clinic. Well, not wanting to stay there, Billy devised an escape plan. And what he did was he made a little key out of some wood that there was kind of like a wooden throw rug in his room. He devised a little key out of that, and one night he broke out of the Renault Clinic by getting through a window in the bathroom. He had to drop about 20-25 feet to the ground below, which was concrete. He did, and in doing so, he twisted his foot and badly injured his foot. At the time, he felt it was probably broken. It's 11 o'clock at night, and it's I believe it was in November. It was very dark and cold outside, so he jumped over the fence and got away, left the clinic. About that time, he heard the dogs and the sirens going off. Someone had detected that he was missing. They were looking for him. Billy ran through the woods and came to the Rhine River and dove in the river, thinking there was no way they would expect him to dive in the river on a cold, wintry night and swim, but he did. And he did make good his escape. He swam down the river for a ways. Must have been awfully cold. When he got out of the river, he stopped, ate some grass and leaves and so forth. He had spent so much time in the forest, he was beginning to understand what to eat and what not to eat, and knew a lot about nature. Ate some plants or whatever that he had found there, and made his way out of the country. and traveled for several months. Actually, what he did is he snuck out of Switzerland and made his way all the way across the country into France, where he joined the Foreign Legion. It doesn't say exactly what the date or the year is in here, but he managed to join the Foreign Legion, and at that time when he got to France, his foot which was really troubling him still, he got some medication and some help with his foot, and the Foreign Legion then packed him off to Algeria. Well, he wasn't in the French Foreign Legion too long when he decided this was not for him, and he already started to plan his escape. He was told by the other legionnaires not to even consider it, because the remote area they were in, he was miles and miles from any kind of civilization, and surely would experience the greatest trials and tribulations if he tried actually to strike out on his own across the deserts, because there were no oases, there was no food and water, and he would surely perish. So Billy looked at it as like, gee, this could be a living hell. So he decided to abandon the idea, is what he told everybody. But so everybody left him alone on that thought and didn't expect him to follow through on those ideas. However, secretly, he was still planning to do it. He did make good his escape one night and spent 2.5 months crossing the dangerous deserts in Algeria to get back to any kind of civilization. During this time period, he almost died on several occasions. Telepathically, he was encouraged in a couple of occasions by Ascot, who at that time was his newfound teacher, who told him and kept encouraging him to go on, to fight it, and to make it, and he did. Well, oddly enough, he fights all the way back, gets back to Europe, and decides to turn himself into the police and confess everything that he's done, draw a clean slate of it. He does this and is immediately put back in the Renault Clinic again, where a Dr. Rosselli, or R-O-S-S-L-I, is how I believe it's spelled in the contact notes, he conducts an interview with Billy to see, check him out. The doctor listens to Billy's strange stories because Billy's telling him all about what's happened to him, about his contacts when he's young, his visitations with Ascot, his telepathic things. And the doctor doesn't seem to be too overwhelmed with all this, but yet he doesn't write any of it down. Billy is then brought before the judge and is offered a chance to explain everything and to perhaps maybe even get off it. Again, he's not able to defend himself and instead finds himself just standing there at the mercy of the court with no defense. He is given 4.5 years in jail for his actions. And he spends that 4.5 years in that clinic and other places where he says he learned a lot about himself, life, and it was a great time to spiritually grow through his telepathic transmissions from Ascot. So he had a rather rough childhood and teenage years start getting going. At that point, though, he actually finally leaves Switzerland and spends about 12 years on the road going through foreign countries, and which brings him up to where he meets his wife in Greece later on. He meets her in Greece on December 25th, on Christmas Day 1965. Previous to that, he had spent years on the road, mostly in India, Pakistan, and those areas, working in all sorts of odd jobs and so forth, getting along. His contacts with Ascot now, which is what I really wanted to get into, but I want to give you a little background on Billy's teenage years. His contacts with Ascot actually began on February 3rd, 1953, on his birthday. That's when the sound of Svath's voice left him. Ascot's voice then came into his head and has been guiding him since during that time period. It's his